Along the east bank of the Penobscot River in Maine is the Mattawamkeag Cemetery, where stands the grave marker of second-class passenger and Baptist minister Charles Kirkland. Charles Kirkland has been called Titanic's least known clergyman, as very little was known about him aside from him being a minister and traveling in second class aboard the Titanic. But in the early 2000s, Titanic International Society treasurer Robert Bracken managed to find his descendants and uncover more of Reverend Kirkland's story. Kirkland was born in 1841 in Miramichi, New Brunswick, Canada, moving to Prince Edward Island and then back to New Brunswick, where Kirkland married a woman named Rachel Warman. They moved to Maine and started a family. He traveled all throughout Maine preaching for several Baptist churches. In 1887, he was noted as visiting the town of South Wynn and baptizing 10 people in the Penobscot River, including an 85-year-old. Fortunately, and wisely, he did that in May rather than the snowy November that we're looking at in this footage right now from when I visited South Wynn. Only a year later, though, the influenza pandemic of 1888 took 3 of Kirkland's children, Grace, George, and Pearl, all buried in the Mattawamkeag Cemetery along with Kirkland's cenotaph. His wife Rachel died suddenly in 1896, prompting Charles to leave the church in depression. She too is buried there. He was briefly married a second time to a woman named Nellie, but they separated a few years after. Around 1911, 2 of his uncles in Scotland died, and Kirkland needed to travel to Scotland to settle the estate on behalf of the whole family. He went over in November 1911 and concluded his time there in early April 1912, booking passage aboard the Titanic. Rather than taking the train from Scotland down to Southampton, England, and boarding the Titanic there, he chose to visit friends in Ireland and sailed over to Belfast aboard a ferry, taking the train to Queenstown and boarding the ship there. Aboard the ship, sailing in second class, Kirkland spent time with his friend, Frank Mayberry. Little else is known of his actions during the voyage. He attended Sunday service in the second-class dining saloon and was present at the evening hymn service that night. As the ship sank, he almost certainly served alongside the other clergy aboard the Titanic, including Father Thomas Biles and Reverend John Harper, performing his duties until the end. Kirkland's body was never recovered, and this stone above an empty grave in rural Maine is all that's left to remember him, sitting about a mile or so from where he was noted for his 1887 baptismal group. There is an unverified family story that states that Kirkland did not finish settling the estate in Scotland when he left in 1912, so his brother needed to travel there a few years later. His brother, tragically, sailed to Scotland aboard the ill-fated Lusitania in 1915 and was lost. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Titanic International Society on both YouTube and in their membership at the link listed in the description below.